Over the past 2 weeks, I've been on a top secret mission, pushing a brand new drone to its absolute limits in real-world conditions. This isn't just another quick test. I've flown it through unpredictable weather, intense environments, and high-speed scenarios to truly understand what it's capable of. In this video, I'm going to break down everything you need to know while comparing it side by side with one of its biggest competitors. And trust me, what I discovered might completely change the way you look at 360 drones. From the very beginning, the goal was simple: test performance in situations that actually matter. Not controlled, perfect conditions, but real-world chaos. We're talking about sudden crashes, flying in rain, battling strong winds, and even dealing with snow. And later in the video, I'll tell you honestly whether this drone is good enough to replace one of the most popular drones out there. Plus, I'll share some practical tips that can instantly improve your footage quality. Now let's talk about one of the biggest highlights: video capability. This drone can shoot in up to 8K at 60 frames per second in full 360 mode. That's a huge deal because it gives you the freedom to reframe your shots later without sacrificing smoothness. You can slow things down, adjust angles, and create cinematic sequences that simply aren't possible with many competing drones. And when you compare this to similar models, this is where it starts to pull ahead. Another major advantage is the color profile. Both shooting modes support advanced color settings that give you much more flexibility when editing. This means better dynamic range, richer colors, and more control during color grading. If you care about professional-looking footage, this is something you'll immediately notice. But there's one key feature that truly separates this drone from others, something that could completely influence your buying decision. I'll get into that shortly. During filming, things didn't always go as planned. At one point, we were hit by an unexpected storm, forcing me to constantly adapt and find small windows of opportunity to keep shooting. It made the entire process more challenging, but also more revealing about how the drone performs under pressure. One of the most exciting moments was filming with a professional biker. The shots we captured were insane, fast-paced, dynamic, and incredibly immersive. To get closer to the action, I turned off certain safety features, and that's when things got risky. A crash was almost inevitable, but surprisingly, the drone handled it incredibly well. No major damage, no lens replacement, just a quick recovery and back in the air. That level of durability definitely stood out. The next test came early in the morning during a beautiful sunrise but with strong winds. This was the perfect opportunity to see how stable the drone really is. While the wind did affect it slightly, most of the footage remained usable. There were moments where minor stitching issues appeared, likely because of movement caused by wind, but considering the conditions, the results were still impressive. Battery life is something you need to consider carefully. On average, I was getting around 16 minutes per battery. That's decent for short sessions, but if you're planning a full shoot day, you'll definitely need multiple batteries. It's not a deal breaker, but it's something to plan for. When it comes to 360 shooting, the results are genuinely impressive. The level of immersion you can achieve is on another level. However, there is a trade-off: editing takes more time. Since you have full control over angles and framing, the process becomes more complex compared to standard footage. But that's expected with any 360 camera system. Interestingly, I found myself using the single lens mode quite often. There's something about that perspective that feels more direct and cinematic. In this mode, you're shooting at up to 4K 60 frames per second, and the color profile still gives you great flexibility for editing. Low light performance was another area I was curious about. Surprisingly, it handled darker environments fairly well. It wasn't perfect, but it delivered results that felt consistent and usable. If you've used similar drones before, the performance here will feel very familiar, which is a good thing. Now, when comparing this drone with others in its category, weight becomes an important factor. This one is noticeably heavier. While that can sometimes translate to better stability, it also affects portability. If you travel a lot, this is something you'll feel. There are also pricing considerations. Some competing drones come at a higher cost, but offer advantages like being under certain weight limits, which can matter depending on where you fly. So it really comes down to what matters more to you: portability or performance. If I had to choose between similar options, my decision would come down to image quality and flexibility. The ability to capture high-quality footage in multiple modes, combined with creative freedom, makes this drone stand out. That said, no product is perfect. One of the first things I noticed was the size. It's bigger than expected, and while it's still portable, it requires more planning when packing for travel. It's not a deal breaker, but it's definitely something you'll notice. Another downside is the lack of certain accessories that could significantly improve shooting quality. For example, tools that help control exposure and motion blur are missing right now, which limits creative control in some situations. There's also a limitation in terms of control modes. At the moment, you're restricted to basic flight styles. While this makes it easier for beginners, it does take away some of the advanced control that experienced users might want. And honestly, nothing replaces the feeling of full control when capturing certain types of cinematic shots. So who is this drone really for? This is perfect for someone who wants cinematic, immersive footage without the complexity of mastering advanced flying techniques. It opens the door to creative shots that would normally require a lot more skill and risk. It's not exactly the same as traditional high-skill flying, but it offers a different kind of freedom, one that's easier to access. For me personally, it doesn't replace my main drone. Instead, it becomes an additional tool, something I can use when I want unique angles and perspectives that simply aren't possible otherwise. One of the best things about it is how easy it is to get started. You can take it out of the box and be flying within minutes. That simplicity makes a huge difference, especially for beginners. Now let's talk about improving your results. The first thing to understand is that wider shots generally retain better quality. The more you crop into your footage later, the more detail you lose. So if you want the best possible results, keep your shots wider during filming. Another important tip is to keep your edits clean and simple. It's tempting to go all out with effects and movement, but overdoing it can actually make your footage harder to watch. Subtle movements and smooth transitions often create a more professional look. And finally, smooth motion is everything. The more consistent your movement is, the better your final footage will look. Sudden stops, direction changes, or unnecessary movements can introduce unwanted shake or visual issues. Planning your shots before you start filming makes a huge difference. At the end of the day, this drone represents a big step forward in creative possibilities.